Hey, how's it going, guys? I know it's been a while. It's Jake here. I wanted to give you guys a updated deck profile. I know I haven't given one of these in a while, um, and I've been doing a lot of testing and modifying. I think the main deck might have only changed by like one card since the last time I did one of these, but the side deck has evolved a lot. Um, so yeah, and that's been where a lot of my focus has been. I'm really liked the main deck. The side deck has just had to be focused a little more um, to make sure that I can properly tackle the deck's worst matchups. Um, so yeah, in that case, I'll go ahead and go over the deck list. Um, Stuff that's more straightforward, at least to anybody who plays Glad Beast by now. I'll try not to go too heavy in detail on to not take too much time, and I'll try to go more detail of like the unique card choices and reasonings behind some other stuff. So, I run two Laquari, one Darius, two Quest, um, two Samnite, one Bestiari, two Retiari, one Armillo, one Hoplomus, one Secutor. I also have three Tigers, one Prisma, and one Rescue Cat. So I'm gonna call that out real fast and stop there. So for GBs, um, I really like to run a 1/3 of my deck ratio being normal summons and GBs for this format. So when you look at it, this is a 43 card deck, right? If you count it out, I count Prisma and Cat as GBs because they're normal summons, and then these other 13. The catch, though, is Secutor is a dead draw. We all know that as a GB player. You can obviously fuse with it if there's a Bestiary or a Laquari in another GB, or you can test Tiger it, but it still requires work to get rid of it. So I consider this a dead draw. So really, 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 I consider this like a 42 card deck with Secutor thrown in as a 43rd. So I look at it as I want 14 monsters because that's 1/3 of 42. So in my eyes, if I don't count Secutor, we're at 14 monsters. So that's how I like my ratio. With the same logic, if I ever side out Secutor, I don't side in a monster necessarily because I don't feel like I need to. It's just a brick. So um, then I also have one hedge card here. I think I've gone over this before, but really unique and really good card. It's a nice little hand trap for GBs that's available in this format. It's obviously not the best thing in every single scenario because it only works on one battle and it halves the attack of your guy. But the fact that it is chainable to Kalut and Honest is great. And the fact that it's a hand trap is just super cool because you just can really just throw off your opponent, especially with like heavy storm plays or MST plays, and they think they're safe to tag to your GB. You just hedge guard them and tag from Millo, and sometimes that just wins you the game. Um, so yeah, and then as a 2100 butt, which is sometimes relevant against decks like Hero Beat, right? So um, we got MST, we got two Shrink, three Book of Moon. Specifically, a long time ago, I used to be on three Shrink. One Shrink became a hedge guard because they serve sort of similar purposes, so that's where that went. We play Solemn, one Starlight Road. I forget if last build, if I had two Starlight Road in, I might have. Um, but I realized that we only need one, so I'm okay with the one. Um, Even against matchups where you could potentially get it off more, like Black Wings, really good players don't tend not to play into it that obviously, so I still only like the one personally. And then obviously decks like that even have outs to Starlight Road, like Oppression, so. But I still think it's good enough to play as a one of. Pole position, I've explained what I think about this card before, but I really enjoy this card. It's just super flexible. Even in the matchups where you figured this card wouldn't be great, it's so easy to get a random back row removal to all of a sudden hit this card, you flip it and pop something in your opponent's side of the field. But also, in the matchups, any matchup where it is relevant, it stops rain control and mind control, which is huge. Those are like big detriments to GBs because it turns off War Chariot. So I really enjoy the card. I don't keep it in post side deck against every single matchup. But main one, it tends to be flexible enough that I like this as a main deck option over any one of my side deck cards. Um, And I don't want to decrease the deck count, because that increases the chance of me drawing too many monsters in my hand. So we will play 2 Chariots. 3 is a lot, especially when your worst matchups are Black Wings and Hero Beat. 2 Compulse, really good in the format. 2 Bottomless, 1 Mirror Force. If I still had the Starlight in last time, I believe the Mirror Force is what I removed it from. Added that in because it's just nice having more attack removal effects in the format. It's also nice having a non-target out to Thought Ruler, because sometimes people drop Thought Ruler against you, right? And so it's nice at least having something like that, because there's just so many target cards in this deck. So 3D Prism, really good in the format. Dust Shoot, pretty broken card. Call of the Haunted, really good card. 3 Dust Tornado. I would play 5 of this card if I could, honestly. I love this card in this format. It's so damn good. And especially the secondary effect to be able to set something. It really allows you to not overextend in your early turns, and the fact that you can dust something and end phase set Compulse, you can end phase set Call, you can end phase set like Pole Position or Chariot, or even end phase set Solemn to keep yourself protected on your own turn is really nice. So side deck, we're down to only 1 Cyber Dragon. There's not a big presence of machines nowadays, machine decks nowadays, and even wherever there are, it's a pretty good matchup for this deck. So I don't think you really need to play a ton of these. The other thing that Cyber Dragon's really good for is, well, for first of all, the other thing with Cyber Dragon I do want to note is you can Prisma reveal Chimera Tech, pitch Cyber Dragon to copy Cyber Dragon and Chimera Tech somebody. So even when you side in 1 Cyber Dragon, it's kind of like you already have 2 in your deck, because you have 2 ways to like machine wipe a field. So always really cool. And then the other matchups where this is normally good against are like the matchups that are just beaters, like Black Wings or Hero Beat, but they do side in their own Cyber Dragons, and at least Black Wings and sometimes Hero Beat play Oppression too. So they do have ways around this. I didn't want, and I had multiple times where I tested against them post side, and I had like 2 Cyber Dragons in hand, and it felt bad, so we removed one. We actually removed the Cyber Dragon for 1D Warrior Lady. I really liked the flexibility of being able to side a single copy of this. It really keeps the opponent on their toes between this and Hopalomus and like any other GB. It really throws them off. So like if they run into a Hopalomus one game, they're probably not going to try to get tricked by it again. They're probably not only going to swing into your face down creature if they have something above 2100 defense, and that's even better for DD Warrior Lady because you can just banish it. Just a solid creature, and against your worst matchups in the format, Blackwing and Hero Beat, it's real good to banish their stuff. Specifically in Hero Beat, half the ways you beat them is Bottomless and Prison, all of their dudes, Ret Tiari all the other ones, and Miracle Fusion's dead the entire game. So yeah, really solid card. I really like it. I don't like to side that many, if any, normal summons that aren't GBs in the deck. So I really limited to just the Warrior Lady. I really don't like to go too heavy on the normal summons that aren't GBs, because it's pretty easy to get monster clogged hands randomly, and that could just blow you out. We're siding second Hopalomus. This is like a flex slot, so I can side out like 1 Secutor for second Hopalomus in matchups that don't need Secutor as much, and want more consistently a 2100 butt. Specifically, really good against like Black Wings or Hero Beat, right? So, Ancient Forest, really good card. Really good card. I think it's just a better Nobleman in this deck. It just does so much for you. So worst case, it's Nobleman. Or well, no, that's probably not worst case, right? But it's obviously effectively stops a flip effect monster. Keep in mind, there are some monsters in this format. Their effects activate when they flip face up. They're not flip effect monsters. Luckily, that's not what you're siding this in for, the decks that play that. So I believe ones that are like that. I know Snowman's like that. He's not a flip effect monster. He just activates when he's flip face up. I think Fossil Dyna's like that too. But you're not siding this in for matchups because of those cards. You're generally siding this in against the decks that play Raikou Hamster. because that's such a staple Edison package for so many of these decks. So like a really good call out deck for this is Vayu Turbo. This is an amazing card versus Vayu Turbo. What's nice versus Nobleman though is even as any player playing any other deck, you can understand when you side in Nobleman against decks like Vayu Turbo, sometimes Nobleman's just dead in your hand almost the entire game because for whatever reason the situation just didn't come up to Nobleman. Or they Raico'd really early in the game, you drew Nobleman later, and it's just never live. This, at the very least, you can put onto the field and mitigate them attacking you. And then obviously for those who don't know, Gladiator Beasts get around the Ancient Forest Destruction effect because Ancient Forest is your effect. You get to choose when during the end of the battle phase you want to activate this effect. You're allowed to choose to activate and resolve any Gladiator Beast effect before you choose to activate Ancient Forest. So yeah, so Gladiator Beasts are able to get around it, which is super nice. But yeah, so really good card. This is a really interesting one, which people probably haven't seen this card before, or even knew what it does. This is called Mystical Wind Typhoon. So this, there's a lot of reasons that I'm running this card right now, but the biggest reason is that this deck needed more outs to Oppression, right? Obviously, you want to be able to out things like Skill Drain too, but Skill Drain has slightly more outs in this deck with like Book of Moon and Compulse combos. But specifically against Vayu Turbo, Blackwings, Hero Beat, every single one of them always sides some sort of Floodgate, whether it's Oppression, whether it's Skill Drain, whether it's both, anything like that. Specifically Oppression. Right now in the main deck, you only have 4 outs to Oppression. Now Oppression's a 2 of. Statistically, right? You should draw the out to Oppression. However, it doesn't always happen. That's also because sometimes there's really other cards on the field that you want to activate MST or Dust on to clear their field for a play. So you won't always have these held in your hand for Oppression or held on the field for Oppression. When Oppression happens, you really want to be able to chain to it and remove it from the field immediately. Now people ask, why don't you go with a different option? Why not Trap Stun? The problem with Trap Stun is it doesn't actually answer the Oppression. It stops it for the turn, which could in theory be fine. In theory, should be enough. In practice, I would say about half the games that I get Oppressioned and there's a Trap Stun, I have a Trap Stun down. I'm not in a position where even if I Trap Stun them that I'm able to tag to Bestiari to out the Oppression just to go 1 for 1. Or, even better, like even the ideal play is I'm not in a position where I can even make Geyserist that turn because I don't have a way to get a second GB to the field. So it really forces you to have to Bestiari on that same turn, or else you lose to Oppression. So it's really tricky. And then sometimes that's and sometimes it's also just like not a good play at the time. You being able to Bestiari on that turn, maybe the reason you were attacking into a guy was because you really needed to run below the other guy after the battle. And now you all of a sudden need to Bestiari the Suppression, and now you're left vulnerable. It's like really weird. Like the Trap Stun is effectively a -1 in those interactions that forces you to Bestiari if possible just to go even. And then other times it's just rough, to be honest. The other options I messed with was like 7 Tools of the Bandit, which that card's okay. That card's not that bad. The problem is the obvious is it doesn't deal with an established Oppression, and sometimes the lifelines are like an issue. That's not usual, but sometimes they are. The only other option, which I tested for a while, was Twister. Twister was a fine card. I liked it enough. There was one minor problem and one bigger problem with Twister, though. The minor problem, the pay 500, sometimes that's super annoying. But the bigger problem was that it only targets face-up cards. In every single meta matchup, specifically like Hero Beat, that was the biggest problem where it was. Sometimes they don't side floodgates, depending on the person's build. Sometimes they don't side floodgates at all, and you're just preemptively siding this card that's meant to be a narrow out to oppression and skill drain. Maybe they still have the future fusion, and that's it, and they have at least that as a target. But sometimes you'll side in like a twister, and you literally just cannot answer. You don't have anything that you can even answer, so you end up losing because you just have this dead card hand all game. One more call out with trap stun I do want to make, which I didn't think of while I was talking about this, was that trap stun also has an issue against hero beat, where so hero beat is your worst of all the matchups. It's the one you have to play most carefully against. Your best card to get around their Gemini Sparks is either Compulse or like Solemn. Compulse especially. Whenever you want to use Trap Stun against like general removal, like Trap Stun versus Deep Prison or preemptively Trap Stun, right, or whatever, their Gemini Spark's still live. So they can Gemini Spark you for like positive advantage on certain interactions. And now you can't chain Compulse or Solemn because your own Trap Stun turned you off, which is really shitty. And I wanted whatever cards in this slot to be good against both Blackwings, Vayu Turbo, and Hero Beat. So, the reason this card's any good. If you read it, it says you can only activate it as Chainlink 3 or higher, which that's normally the thing that would keep people away from it. But after that, it's literally just MST. Destroy a spell trap card in the field. You cannot activate this card if there's multiple cards or effects with the same name in the chain. So the reason that this works is, at minimum, it works in all the same situations that I wanted to Twister in. Because when you think about it, right, there's an oppression on the field, or your opponent's about to flip oppression. You tag a GB, so that's Chainlink 1. You activate as a cost, you send it back to tag. Chainlink 2, they activate the effect of oppression, whether it's they flip it for the first time or they activate the one that's on the field. That's Chainlink 2. Chainlink 3, you chain this, kill the oppression, you're good to go, just like an MST, or just like a Twister, or Dust Tornado, right? In a similar lens versus Skill Drain, if the Skill Drain's face down, if you bring out the GB from your deck, and you trigger the effect, like Bestiari or Marmillo, and then they chain Skill Drain, that's Chainlink 2, you chain the Mystical Wind Typhoon, Chainlink 3, that KOs it. So at a minimum, it works in the Twister scenarios every single time that you'd want them to. In the best case scenario, though, if you just activate any GB effect, right, any one of them, and they chain a card, this card's always live and can hit face down cards, not just face up cards. So inherently, even though it's situational, it is a more live version of Twister that you're siding, which is huge when you end up preemptively siding it into back row deck matchups that just happen to not side in floodgates. At least this card is more live than Twister. That's really what it comes down to. So because of that, I have actually liked this card, and I've even upped it to 2 because I wanted more back row out. So next one, Super Polymerization. Obviously, this is very targeted. This is just for heroes. Namely, especially Hero Beat. That's really what it's for here. The reason it works so well in this deck is because we have all the extra deck room, right? Like, we're not playing actual synchros except for cheating out Stardust. Like, I'm only playing one Starlight Road. I only need one Stardust, to be honest. I have summoned second Herc before at most. I'm playing Cyber Dragon plus Call of the Haunted. I can at most make 2 Chimera attack. I could maybe make 3 Geysers, but even in this case, I could probably drop one of these and these for room if I wanted to, and I still had room to put all this in. So the obviously we play to Hero Beats, right, is like we also already play a lot of different elements, right? So we have a few of the water element, a few of the earth element. So like we have element-wise some of these stuff. Absolute Zero, obviously, the obvious one, and Gaia, the other obvious one. The third obvious enough one that most people know that side Super Poly, if you're siding it for heroes, you side this too, because this gets rid of double alias, because they're Gemini monsters, right? These last 2 are interesting. A lot of people might know this, but other people might not. So Chimera, specifically Cyber Twin Dragon. Cyber Twin's interesting because you're already siding in Cyber Dragon versus matchup, right? Because it's a 2100 versus a matchup of 1900s and lower. So you're siding in Cyber Dragon. But because you're playing GBs, as any GB player would know, they're probably going to side in Cyber Dragon versus you as well, because with the same logic, Cyber Dragon's pretty solid to all the GB creatures. So if you Cyber Dragon first, and they already have Cyber Dragon in hand, they're going to attempt to summon Cyber Dragon, and they're going to attempt to Chimera Tech you to get a free +1 and get rid of your Cyber Dragon. If they slam Cyber Dragon to the board, and you have Super Poly down, you have the option to, before they Chimera Tech you, obviously, like, you have to do this before, like, as a chain to the summon. But you can Super Poly for Cyber Twin Dragon, which obviously could just blow them out. Same logic is if a deck like Heroes or anything like that ends up summoning just any machine against you while you have a Cyber Dragon to try to out your Cyber Dragon. Before they Chimera Tech you, you could preemptively Chimera Tech Over Dragon. This will be much less likely, if out of any of them, that you would ever summon, right? Because this one also sends the other cards you control to the graveyard, which sucks. And if it's just like Cyber Dragon plus a machine, it's only 1600 attack. So, like, there's a lot of situations here, right, where you're probably literally never bringing this one out. But you can see the logic of how this one can actually come up, and there's no reason to not at least get yourself covered for the potential scenario. I've looked in the format. These are all the ones that are even possible in the hero matchup, and that's really what this is for. So the closest next playable one in the format is 5-head dragon, but there's never going to be 5 dragons on the field, even against Dragon Turbo. So yeah, right now this card it's done enough, and I really wanted something there's another card that helped shut out heroes and did a little more against them, so I've really liked it right now. So as for this Smashing Ground, I really like this card. This was a recent-ish addition on the side. I just realized that I wanted another, like, a single card versus the Hero and Blackwing matchups that was just another card that can just remove something from the field. That way I could dodge having to go into damage step attacking something in case they had Honest or Collude. So a single Smashing Ground I liked. I don't like running more than this, because even though it's a good card, I really prefer to have chainable and protection cards over this, but I think at least one of these was justified. So I like it in general, and obviously, sure, it's good in random matchups, right? And it's another card that doesn't target, so good into the Rogue Thought Ruler, right? So just there's a lot of reasons. Third Chariot, this is obvious. We gotta side the third. There are some matchups Chariot's just broken in, so we side the third. Trap Hole, specifically 3 Trap Hole. This might look like a lot to people, and I can agree that it looks like a lot. But really, this card is just for Blackwings. I can obviously use it against other stuff if it deems necessary, if I really want to. It's specifically pretty good into the Chaos Fairies deck, because all their stuff is like 1400 and 1300. It's like actually kind of good into that deck, and like all their deck inherently dodges bottomless barely, but like it gets hit by Trap Hole. But really, it's for Blackwings. Previously, this was double Trap Hole and a side decked Torrential Tribute, and then I lost a few random games against Blackwings, games 3, because I had Torrential down and a monster, and if this was just a third Trap Hole, I would have won the game because it wouldn't have killed my monster. So that happened enough times where I was just like, fuck it, I'm siding a third Trap Hole. So that's how we got here. Obviously, great card versus Blackwings. That's really the point here. Everybody knows it's good against Blackwings. I deemed that it's good enough to go ahead and play 3, because I already play like all the static removal, like the stuff for monsters that are already on the field. I already play like all that shit as 3-ofs. So might as well just play the 3 Trap Hole, because having stuff to stop their Icarus Surge is just huge. Transmigration Prophecy, I still stick by this card. This card's sweet. Really like it against heroes, really like it against Vayu. It's just really sweet. It's basically a DD Crow that targets 2 cards, right? And then it's also a DD Crow that sometimes your opponent decides to MST, and worst case, you chain it to get rid of 2 things. Or you get rid of one thing, because they only have one target, and then you shuffle a random card in your own graveyard as the second card back into your deck. So it's a pretty neat card, honestly. Um, I really like it. If this card was at more than one, I would probably consider siding two, but it's at one, so that's where we're at. And third Compulse. Compulse is just so good that I think it's worth siding at third. I really only bring in the third versus Vayu Turbo, and I'll bring it in versus Hero Beat because it is such a beautiful chain to a Gemini Spark to prevent them to draw a card. So yeah, that's the deck. Some of this went a little longer than I expected, but yeah. If anybody has any questions, let me know. I hope that you enjoyed the profile, and yeah. Besides that, thanks for tuning in.